Let's talk about one of the biggest stressors at work. And it's not maybe what you think. We like to focus on workload and the conflict in between people, but really behind it all is communication. Is it being enhanced or is it poor communication? And so when we talk about where the stress is coming from at work, well, how are we talking about it? How are we talking to each other while doing it? These are the misunderstood emails where you're interpreting in between the lines. This is meetings that feel tense when they shouldn't even be. This is the feedback that you're receiving or it lands wrong. And there's a great tool that you can use in order to shine light on how we communicate and how you can close that gap so there is less conflict around the ways of working. Now, this isn't about putting your communication in one bucket or another. This isn't a personality label. This is about communication energy. How do you naturally communicate? How does that other person naturally communicate? How are we going to respond to one another to make decisions at work? Now, in DISC behavioral science, there is a micro assessment and report you can get that just focuses on the communication portion of these behavioral science styles because communication is that big. How do you prefer to receive information? What stresses you out about how people communicate back to you? What are others actually misinterpreting about how you are communicating out? And where do you have great flexibility or flexibility room that can reduce the friction? Everyone has access to all these work styles, but you naturally fall into one or two of them. When you are in your comfort zone where you really thrive, you're going to be one style or up to two. And the understanding of that, of how you're wired and how someone else wires, can explain why are they like this? Why am I like this? And then you can start to enhance that communication. You can start to work without so much emotional energy around it. Teams can recover faster because that added stress isn't there. And conflict is addressed healthy in a timely manner versus being silent, letting it ruminate and build day after day, weeks after weeks. And with this better communication, you don't just improve that workflow between departments and between team members, the flow of information, but you also protect your own energy because you understand it and you honor it. Let's dig into the different work styles. Ds are direct and results focused, so they like to communicate quickly, directly, straight to the point. One sentence answers. They don't like all the fluff and puff. They like to focus on the outcome at hand. So they value efficiency, decisiveness, and progress. So it will stress them out when people communicate with them with long explanations, those fluff and puff emails, repetition over and over and over again, receiving the same information, lack of progress. So you communicate out the same thing and nothing is moving forward. Again, they want to move to the result. They might even perceive some communication going on in meetings, the fluff and puff stuff, the conversational banter before a meeting even starts as inefficiency, like we could have started by now. So what actually helps when communicating with a D type of work style is to lead with the result in hand. What are you trying to achieve? What's the outcome you want? Being more concise, getting rid of some of that fluff and respecting their time. And how Ds can communicate better with other work styles is to slow down just enough to invite some collaboration, some discussion, instead of just moving to the next step. And this is especially when the other styles need some context, which we'll get into next. Is are our expressives. There are people-orientated type of work style, so they like to be verbal. They like to have a voice. They're very energetic and they can have that positivity and connection. That's where they thrive in their communication. And this can bring motivation to the group or a new hope for what's next in this result. It builds relationships because that's what they value most, and that can also bring out creative thinking. Now, where communication can get triggered for I's is that isolation, right? You take away that voice. They're too isolated. It could be a rigid structure in which you move to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, and it's too condensed, too structured that they don't have that wiggle room to be creative. And that also brings me to the next trigger of being shut down too quickly. Because if they still want to discuss it, they want that room to discuss it. So if you're moving on to the next thing and they have not gotten those thoughts out, those ideas out, that discussion points, again, that communication is now going into a stress state versus an enhanced state. So what will help eyes in communication is allowing that space to talk it out. And that doesn't mean it has to be in this big group meeting, but it could be, hey, let's spend 15 minutes after this meeting and really talk about what this means between us. Those type of more focused, paired up discussions. They also want to be acknowledged for the ideas that they're bringing or the redirection in which they were involved in that brings the value. Their communication style is also very collaborative and welcoming. So if it has to be very stern and strict, there's a way to do that and keep it still warm. Now, where eyes can work on their communication is tightening up that message because they're kind of shiny object syndrome. They like to take on the world sometimes. So when you can tighten up what is it that you really want to do, the next step, the thing you're focusing on, the thing you're talking about, tightening up that message is going to help with interacting the other work styles and communication. It also brings credibility to what you're saying. Now, S styles are supportives, they're steady and methodical. So they want some of that consistency in communication, opposite of what D's were looking for in communication. They're looking for some care, right? They don't want one word answers, one sentence answers, because it almost feels like they did something wrong, because they value that harmony and stability that comes with certain communication. It builds trust for them. They truly want to listen, so they want to give it that space. They're okay with the fluff and puff in emails, for example. Now, communication triggers that stress them out is sudden change, those abrupt emails where a lot of things can be interpreted, that conflict where two people might be disagreeing in a meeting, even if they're coming to a consensus. S is stressing because it's uncomfortable for them. And communication that's rushed or pressured, it's being forced. It also puts them into a stress mode. Now, where you can support S's in your communication is providing that reassurance that some things are not going to change, that here's step 1, 2, 3, here's some clear steps that we're going to be taking, getting rid of that uncertainty and unsteadiness, explaining the why behind things so that they can truly understand all the pieces in play. And giving them time to process. S are reflectives. So if you want to communicate something out and then expect an answer right away from them, again, there's the pressure, there's the push. They want to think about it. They want to have some questions maybe ready for the next session before they move forward. So give them that space to reflect. And where S's can be flexible in the communication is to speak up earlier. So maybe they need agendas in the meeting so that they can bring the information, the voice to the table versus not speaking up at all, reflecting, coming back after decisions are already made. So speaking up earlier in their communication style with little tips and techniques you can do to get that information early is going to help them from feeling that pressure to just make a decision, the force. Our C's, our compliance, our data in detail. They're also slow and methodical, right? They don't want as much change. They don't want high risk. They want precision in their communication. So they might be noticing your grammatical errors. They might need more information than a one-liner, right? So who's giving this direction? Where did the information come from? The credibility? What data sources have you used? They're looking for that type of information because they're thinking more logically in the communication. They want some structure around it. And that makes them really good for risk management type of communication, quality control type of communication, because they're making sure all the boxes are checked and all the gaps are filled. They have a strategic thinking mind through the whole process, again, to reduce the risk. So unlike D's and I's, vague instructions in communication are going to stress them out. Emotional decision making during meetings when people are just spewing out of their mouths, that stresses them out. And rushed timelines because they also want time to reflect. So communication with a C work style is being more specific, bringing in those data and details and information, allowing documentation for repeatable processes, or referencing processes that are already out there. And then, just like an S, allowing time for those reflective questions. And how a C can enhance their communication to the other work styles is to understand that not every decision needs to go into that data analysis paralysis, that you don't need perfect data for some of these decisions. And sometimes just clarity of the next steps is better than unlimited search for certainty. DISC isn't everything that you are. It's about flexing your communication to understand what your needs are and what is the other person's needs, meeting in the middle. The most effective communicators that I've met aren't the loudest. They're not the smartest. It's the ones that are the most adaptable.